if you could say a little bit about your history prior to your exposure to the practice of EMDR.
Well, my interest in the field of psychology begins with my interest in the nature of consciousness. As an undergraduate at the University of California, Santa Cruz, I thought about going into a history of consciousness program. Ultimately, I decided not to go that direction. But my real interest is in the nature of consciousness and the relationship between consciousness and the physical universe. Does consciousness pre-exist the development of the universe? And does the universe emerge from consciousness? Or is it the other way around, and is consciousness an emergent property of matter? So out of that philosophical and metaphysical interests, there's a practical need to have a career. So I began to study psychology. And at that time, most of what was in mainstream psychology was not of great interest to me. I had become disenchanted with psychoanalysis because of Freud's abandonment of the traumagenic theory of the origin of psychoneurosis in favor of the electra and Oedipal complex and this complex theory he developed. And I wasn't very impressed with Skinnerian behavioral psychology, which ignores the nature of consciousness and basically acts like we aren't conscious beings. So I was interested in the mind-body areas of psychology. And I studied as many of the different mind-body approaches as possible. I wrote my senior thesis on that, and then went on and got a master's degree in an integral approach to psychotherapy, studying Upasana meditation, insight meditation, studying Gestalt therapy and body-focused psychotherapies, about a dozen different kinds of body-focused psychotherapies. And then I went on later and got my PhD in psychology and continue to be interested in sort of how to work closely with the mind and the body together. I moved away from somatic psychotherapy in the mid-'80s and became more interested when I went back to get my PhD in Ericksonian hypnosis, self-psychology, and dynamic forms of therapy. And then, then in 1991, discovered EMDR, and it kind of, I've described it as kind of like the keystone in my studies, because my original training was in pure process work. Gestalt and body work is not based on psychodynamics. It's not based on the DSM and differential diagnosis. It's based on pure emotional process. We were trained in how to look at the body, how to see the history of the person in their body posture, in their facial expression, in the subtle expression, in pupillary dilation and muscle movements in the body, to read the emotional history and the emotional experience of the person. And then when I went back to graduate school and studied differential diagnosis, I became fascinated by how do different conditions come about, and the need to treat different people with different kinds of histories and different kinds of conditions with different methods. Not one method for everybody, not one way of using a method for everybody. And EMDR allowed me to bring these two very different streams of studies together. EMDR has this sort of paradoxical nature that on the one hand, the protocol is very structured. It's very, very structured to the point that new trainees coming to EMDR struggle with the script. It's very antithetical to people with humanistic backgrounds and other backgrounds who have to sort of read the words off the page. But within the reprocessing work that we do in EMDR, there's a tremendous scope for being very flexible in the way you interact with clients and the need to be able to read what's happening in the moment. And a lot of what you're reading is nonverbal. It's in voice tones, it's in facial expression, it isn't just in the narrative of what people are saying. So that background in body-mind psychology has been very helpful to me in being able to see things and understand things are going on that sometimes mental health professionals who don't have that background go, where are you seeing that? Where did you get that information from? So it's been very, very helpful that way, and it allows me to bring these two worlds together, a world that's very structured and uses differential diagnosis and differential treatment planning, and a world that's very pure process and works in a very client responsive way.